Well, good morning and welcome to the Future of Leadership. I'm Zoe Routh and I'm a leadership expert and I specialize in the people stuff. And I want to say thank you for everybody who's showing up live on the call this morning. And normally I'm like, oh, they're taking time out of their busy office lives to dial in. And yeah, I know we're all dialing in from our respective living rooms or kitchen tables or bedrooms or wherever you can find a corner of space to work in. So I appreciate you being here and having a bit of time to play this morning. And I wanted to be a little bit playful, even though we are in serious times. And I appreciate that a lot of people have some very immediate concerns that they're working on in their businesses and their lives just to get through this crisis. And so we're going to take a little bit of time out from the immediate crisis to look at the big picture stuff. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about will probably come more to the fore and be actively worked on in probably the next couple of weeks, as opposed to immediately now, as people try and deal with all the situations that they've got on. So a little bit about me, if you haven't met me before, hello, g'day, eh? That's my best effort to blend my Australian experience with my Canadian background. So I've been in Australia since '96, and I still sound Canadian, so they tell me. I think Canadians are particularly well equipped to deal with the coronavirus crisis because we have been stockpiling maple syrup for years. It's true. There is a strategic reserve of maple syrup in Canada, and 1 year it was actually stolen and it caused a major crisis. So too bad we didn't think about toilet paper and hand sanitizer. My original intention for this gathering was to have a wonderful face-to-face gathering where you could all meet each other and share your experiences. And that was husband. Co-working. Where you could meet and share your experiences and get to know each other and get some support outside of your usual sphere of engagement. Now, of course, we are sharing virtually, and isn't that a marvelous thing? And what I want to do is, instead of, well, we were going to have that live interaction, then I was going to invite you to amplifiers. And I think it's not the right time to do that. I mean, my amplifiers program is still going, and I understand that people do not have the budget, resources, aptitude, time to join the program. So this is not going to be a big sales pitch for amplifiers. I do, however, have the opportunity to talk to you individually. If you are interested in what can you do for yourself and for your team, we can do that separately offline. And I'm going to pop in the chat box a link for you if you want to book in 30 minutes to just have a chat. And it's not a sales pitch. It's also, I've been talking to my clients also about what's going on for them and giving them advice around how to run virtual team meetings, to how to keep themselves and their teams engaged, tips like that. So as you can imagine, my calendar got emptied about 2 weeks ago with the coronavirus. And so I found myself with opportunity to be able to talk to people. So I've put the link in the chat box there if you want to book in 30 minutes with me. So that's sort of where we're going to end up. While I switch over to my slides, I'd love to have you write in the chat box, just as a way of introduction, what are you not missing now that we are tucked away at home? And it might be, maybe you're not missing the morning commute. Maybe you're not missing having to do all your meetings in a suit and to dress up. Or maybe you're not missing having to put the full suit on and you do half suit. What is it that you are not missing through COVID-19? Now, as you do that, I'm going to bring up my slides for you. Okay. Just going to check the chat box. Anybody not missing something? Okay. Not missing the suits. I'm not missing the suits either. I'm finding that my wardrobe is not requiring a lot of action lately. So it's the same sort of 3 outfits day after day. It's pretty good. Commute, not missing the commute. I know, right? It's kind of a good thing. So the car is not getting a workout at all. So these are pretty awesome things. I'm probably, if I worked in an office, I'd probably not miss all the interruptions, though many of you have interruptions at home. That was classic. That was my husband dropping something, classic interruption. lost time going between client meetings. Yeah, that's right. Like video conferencing is just so efficient, and not missing the commute for sure, but also shifting from place to place for meetings. Thank you, Andy. Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so let's get into the content of what I want to cover here. Like I said, this is where I did want to finish. We were going to be till live. I was going to get you to fill out this value card, what we found valuable. Do you want to join the program? But what really the invitation is for you to have a chat with me. And I think it's incredibly valuable just to have someone to vent to and to use as a sounding board in terms of what you're going through. As leaders, we take a lot on our shoulders. And I think having somewhere where you can go just to decompress and not even to problem solve, but just to go blah is useful. So I'm here for you. I'd love to chat to you. So a little bit about me, if you haven't met me before, this is me on the Lara Pinta Trail, which is an extraordinary part of the world out of Alice Springs. And I did have to cancel my end-to-end program this year, which is a bit disappointing, a 16-day trek. My background is in outdoor experiential education. So in Canada, I led canoe trips for about 9 summers and managed the program out there. And then when I came to Australia in '96, I came to work with Outward Bound, which is all about personal and leadership development in the outdoors. And I incorporate some of this work still in my programs. About 2002, I set up my own leadership development organization called Inner Compass. And I did that part-time while I worked at the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation, where I got to work with many different industries and sectors in rural and regional Australia, which was amazing. And I've been full-time in my leadership development practice for, I think this is year 7 now, which is great. These are some of the people or clients that I've worked with across many different industries, from agriculture to retail, to universities, to government agencies, to lots of not-for-profits. So I have a really diverse range of experience with different people stuff. And I've come to see leadership in many different contexts, and there's common themes, common challenges, and all unique context to what people are achieving in their world. So the takeaways I would like you to walk away with from today are 3 critical shifts you need to make to embrace the future of leadership, some key skills that you need to develop or hone if you haven't already worked on those before, and to remind you that you are not alone. And I think particularly as we go through this next few months, 3 to 6 months or longer, this is a time where we're really going to need to reach out to each other beyond our immediate spheres, social spheres, to get new ideas, new connections, new resources. And it gives me great hope that we're seeing this around the globe in some different contexts. There's an enormous amount of collaboration happening in the medical sector, trying to get a vaccine out there to counter the coronavirus situation. And so I think that's a great model, a great role modeling for how we can drop borders and start collaborating when it's a meaningful outcome that's going to benefit everybody. So I think that kind of collaboration, international collaboration, is going to be a hallmark of one of the things that we need to do in leadership. And that comes with it a whole set of abilities that we need to develop and lenses that we need to develop so that we can do that effectively. I want to introduce you to my friend Brent Hodgson, and he wrote a wonderful piece this week on that the crisis is forcing us to reevaluate. And I think it frames nicely the context for how we need to think about leadership more broadly. So he says, and he's a marketing specialist, and he's the one who helped me tune into the start of the coronavirus long before it became in everybody's face. And so he's helped me in my business prepare for that, and he's helping his clients through it as well. So he says values are shifting. And I think through something epic like this, a pandemic, our values will shift. We can see that already in how we're showing up every day, and that it's important that we manage our safety first. I think we took that for granted. He says essential workers aren't bankers, politicians, and business leaders. And I think that's interesting to observe, right? It's the nurses, the truck drivers, and the shelf stackers, and the primary producers who are feeding us all through this. So who we see as essential and giving great value to the community has definitely shifted in terms of our emphasis and our focus and our appreciation. He says, out of all this, there is a rethinking of the core ideas that sit at the foundation of our society. Now, this is big stuff. This is like massively big picture stuff. And like I said, we're in crisis management at the moment. In a couple of weeks, as we settle into this routine, we will then be able to think more deeply and richly about these types of issues, because this will help craft what we're moving into next. So he says the foundations are things like how we feed, clothe, shelter, and how do we look after people who suffered bad luck through no fault of their own. What a fair go means, and what happens if the go is good, but the circumstances are unfair. Like, how unfair is it that people are getting sacked right now? It's really unfair, and it's no one's fault. How we look after those who are less strong and less wealthy and less resilient. The nature of privilege and security, and what insecurity and exclusion means in tangible terms. The nature of risk, reward, and responsibility in business. The extent to which one person can take personal responsibility. The fairness of certain types of contracts. And here's a really big piece that we're going to need to navigate as leaders: the interconnectedness of the economy, and how everyone relies on everyone for everything, not just poor people relying on rich people to provide capital and be job creators. And I think this is a really important one. Is some businesses are still thriving, and that's fantastic, because we know that if they are able to thrive and offer employment and keep money circulating in the economy, it's going to have a knock-on effect. And I'm very conscious about the purchases and the purchases that I'm making, because that is helping another business stay in work, and that's helping the people that they employ, which is helping feed their families. And so I think more than ever, we're really seeing the interconnection of all of our decisions, and we can be more conscious and deliberate about that. And if we can, to keep supporting our suppliers. And I know in my practice, my business is well set up for the next 6 months. We can continue to employ my team. We can continue to employ the contractors that we've got to help us with my book that's coming out in July, so that my editor still has some work and that my printer still has some work, and we are able to do that. And that just helps tick things over. And so we see that all of our actions really do have a ripple effect. Whereas I think before this, we were a little bit oblivious to that. We just kind of, did things. And I think this is highlighting how important each of our decisions and contributions really is at every level. And the last thing he says, even simple stuff, like what we value in life, what makes us truly happy, and what self-care means. And I think that's true. And like you, it's like, I used to be so in my default mode of getting up, going to the gym and carrying on, or getting up and going to my running club and carrying on. It's like, I don't have those networks now. I have to be really intentional about connecting with people and getting those kinds of activities done, and how much more you appreciate them. I know walking out in nature is something I've always appreciated. I value it even more now, because it's the relief from the inside of your four walls. So I think that sort of frames a little bit of the big picture context about the future of leadership. And this is the kind of thinking work we're going to need to do as leaders. It's big, it's heady, there's no easy answers, there's no black and white answers. It's into the fog we go. And that requires different kinds of skills and different kinds of attitudes. And I love this quote from Marcel Proust, that the voyage of discovery consists in not, I'm gonna have to move you guys so I can actually read that. There we go. Not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. I think this is really important now. So from a literal point of view, we can't actually go seek new landscapes. We're confined to the four walls around us. How we look at our situation and having new eyes, new perspectives is going to be critical. So our work as leaders in the future of leadership is learning how to develop our perspective. And when it comes to looking at things differently, I thought, yes, we need to look at a dog with big puppy eyes. And how wonderful is it to have animals around right now? I know that somebody told me that you can't buy any backyard chooks in Canberra because everybody's decided that they want to have backyard chooks now that they're going to be at home. You can't get rescue dogs because they've all been collected as something to give the family and people to look forward to looking after through this time. So that's a good news story, right? So all the rescue animals are being looked after. So the first big shift comes after we contend with this. If you know what this stands for, or any of the letters stand for, pop them in the chat box, and we'll see how we go in terms of how familiar you are with these terms. E.V.U.C.A. Have a go. See if you know them. See if anybody comes out a winner. Let's see. What does E.V.U.C.A stand for? You might have heard of VUCA before, but maybe not E.V.U.C.A. Let's see if anybody knows. I got a few people on video. Raise your hand if you know what this stands for. Got no guesses. Okay. No winners. All right. Let's have a crack. So what it stands for is this. This is our current context as leaders. We are in an exponential kind of environment. And all the charts we've been seeing about, flatten the curve, that whole big arrow moving up quickly is the nature of the exponential nature of this specific crisis that we're in. However, we've been in an exponential world in lots of different areas, from technology to travel to medical technology intersections. There's a lot of things that have been, Stuart, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Winner, winner, chicken dinner for you, Stuart. And the first letter is exponential. So I was just describing how, as we look at the pandemic, and this is what the concern is, right? So it's the rate at which things double, how quickly they double. And if they're doubling every day, it's in Canberra, we started, where are we up to now? 3 weeks ago with 1 case, and now we're up to 90. That's extraordinary. What this means in terms of leadership, if we boil it back down to the people stuff, is our brains are actually not equipped to deal with exponential situations. Our brains evolved hundreds of thousands of years to deal with very linear, contained situational experiences. So our brains were meant to handle the risks associated with our immediate surroundings, the people in our tribe, the people outside of our tribe, the threats that are ahead of us in the next week or couple of weeks or season. And that's what our brain evolved to handle. And it's very well equipped to deal with immediate threats. And that's the amygdala. It's our primary fear, fight, flight, and freeze response. And it assesses risk like that. When it comes to exponential stuff, it's literally mind-boggling. Our brain has very much a huge difficulty in processing that, and actually triggers us into an amygdala hijack when we're confronted with an exponential situation. So if you find yourself or the people that you work with are not being very cognitively functional, like their attention span or your attention span is distracted, you keep coming back to the same thing over and over, or you have to get up and have a break every 5 minutes, or you feel emotive, this is the amygdala being triggered by the situation. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity are all the same, have the same effect on us. It all puts us into survival mode. So this pandemic has kind of accelerated, accentuated all of that. This has been our context for some time, but it's seen at a distance. Now it's real, in our face, global. There is not one country on the planet, no matter what they say, that isn't being affected by this situation. And this is more than any other experience we've had before from either of the world wars. Have we had an experience that is common across all of humanity? And that has huge opportunities for it in terms of leadership and in terms of developing compassion and empathy and a whole new, I would say whole new world order, but that sounds a little bit too Star Warsy. New ways of doing things, as Brent was talking about, new political systems, new business systems, new economic systems. So this is the context in which we find ourselves. So we need to make some shifts in how we do leadership to meet that. If we look on this model, we have E.V.U.C.A accelerating up the left axis, the vertical axis, and our perspective and skill needs to increase on the bottom perspective. At the earlier stages, we can be an anticipator. We can be excited about what's happening and be striving to be successful as leaders in this context. At Achiever, this is our default understanding of what is effective leadership, and it is no longer applicable. So the Achiever stage of leadership maturity, and I lean on integral leadership theory here, of the likes of Bill Torbert, of Ken Wilber, of Suzanne Cook-Browder, and others who have talked about the different stages of leadership maturity from an individual leadership perspective, as well as a collective social growth context. Achiever is where we're sitting. 80% of our leadership sits, and this is about being able to set a plan, achieve a goal. And in our context, we see that that is successful leadership. That's what business is built around. We set a course of action, strategic plan that is 2 to 5 years in length, and we have these things that we set out to do. That works fine 50 years ago when we have a very contained, linear, non-exponential context. Now our context is global, interconnected, and E.V.U.C.A. And so leading as an achiever is not going to get us where we need to go. It's not going to actually solve the problems that we are contending with right now. And so if we stay in that default perspective with those default skills, we're going to end up fading. Our businesses will collapse. They won't survive this crisis. So what we need to do is shift to an amplifier. What is an amplifier? It's an amplifier is a leader who can take action and understands the ripple effect. An amplifier is someone who can look at the complexity of the systems in which they operate, their businesses operate, and within the business, and see where the trigger points are, see where the hubs and lever points are in order to create a systemic change. And it's about being able to design systems that are interconnected, interrelated, that are anti-fragile, as Nicholas Taleb would describe it. So there's a whole set of skills that we need to make there. And we'll talk a little bit about those in a minute. The 3 shifts that we need to make is what we need to look at next. So we're going to move from achiever to amplifier and avoid being a fader. There are 3 specific shifts. And the first one is to expand your perspective. Expand your perspective. What do I mean by this? There is 2 ways to expand your perspective. One is to zoom out, and this is called sense making. And the other one is to zoom in, and this is about making sense. So sense making is expanding your perspective across 2 domains. One is time, and the other one is people. So how big is your perspective right now? So and I'd love you to write this down either for yourself or in the chat box, is what kind of time framework are you working in? So across your business. So probably right now, it's like the next week to a month, maybe the next 3 months, because we're in crisis. If we park the crisis for a moment, what was the usual time frame that you were working with across your business? Was it 3 years? Was it 5 years? Was it 20? Was it 100? Was it multi-generational? So the perspective that we need to shift, well, let me just let you capture that. So think about that for a second. So where were you formally sitting in your timeline horizon with which you made decisions and managed decisions? Immediate or a little bit more? Was it multi-generational? Somewhere in there. Yeah, so Sarah says previously quarterly, yearly, and 3 years, which is definitely an achiever capability. And when we manage business, that seems sound and reasonable thing to expect. And now daily, weekly, and monthly, yeah. Stuart, 12 to 24 months, now 12 to 15 weeks, best case, 3 to 6 months, yeah. So through crisis, absolutely, we need to manage things right now. And as amplifiers, what we need to do is manage that and the bigger long-term perspective. The Iroquois in North America had the saying of, we need to make decisions thinking about 7 generations ahead. 7 generations is about 200 years. And that was one of the things that they cultivated in their culture, is that to think about our ripple effect across time for not only our children, our grandchildren, but our great-grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, 7 generations. And 200 years, when you think about it, is just a blip. I was recently in Italy and saw many fantastic ancient Roman ruins. And it would just blow my mind thinking about Julius Caesar coming into the Forum 2,000 years ago, and the ripple effect of some of his decisions and actions across time. And 2,000 years is nothing. If you think about Aboriginal culture and history in this country, over 60,000, 100,000 years, depending on where you get your resources from. So that's epic. So if we do that kind of work, it can do a couple of things. So as we expand our perspective, it can open up the possibilities, open up our scope of responsibilities, and paradoxically make us feel incredibly powerless at the same time. And this is the paradox that we need to manage. And in fact, managing paradox is one of the most essential future of leadership skills that we need to manage. We need to cultivate. So how we look at the long-term bigger picture and how we look at now, and we need to actually do both of them. We can't just do them in isolation. So expanding your perspective and zooming out with time is really important. A really good website that I love to look at to help expand perspective that I encourage you to do, because it's well written and it's well illustrated with stick figure cartoons, is Tim Urban's Wait But Why, waitbutwhy.com. And I recommend anybody who wants to start expanding their perspective and understanding of culture, history, humanity, and time to go there. It's a worthy read and an entertaining one as well. So Tim Urban, wait, but why? Wait as in hang on a minute, but, and then why.com. So the other shift in perspective that we need to make is about who is in our circle of concern. Who is in our circle of concern? And as amplifiers, we want to move beyond what achievers have. So achievers we have as our circle of concern is ourselves, our family, our business, maybe our stakeholders, maybe our community. And that's kind of about it. As amplifiers in the future of leadership, and the pandemic is forcing us to think this way, our circle of concern is actually global. We actually have to care about what's happening in Italy and Spain and France and the US because it all has ripple effects back to us. So from a personal interest point of view, it's really important to care about those things because the decisions we make or that they make will impact on us, and the decisions we make will impact on them. And it's another paradox that we can't take care of our family unless we take care of the world. And this is brain shifting and brain breaking in some ways, and heartbreaking also, because we can still feel quite powerless. Who am I? How can I affect the world when all I have is what I have right now? And so an amplifier manages that dimension. So how can I do what right now, and how can I create what I do right now have a positive ripple effects through time? I think the other lovely thing that's happening because of the pandemic is our realization that we actually need to take care of the vulnerable people in our society for self-preservation reasons, which has an altruistic effect. So the homeless person on the street are a potential COVID-19 virus carrier. They don't have a lot of hygiene resources at their disposal. They don't have a home. So how can they wash their hands? How can they do hand sanitizer? And they go and use the resources that we use. There's a gentleman outside of the Woolies that I go to in Dixon who has been living there, camped out outside of Woolies for a couple of months at least. And he's not clean. He has nowhere to go and get clean. And so I've seen him go into Woolies and sit on the bench and get things and get given things. And if he's sick, everybody else is sick in there. And we know that this virus is that transmittable. And so we need to look after people like him for our own self-preservation. But what I'm really happy about, if it takes self-preservation for us to catalyze and look after each other, I'm all for it. All right, so perspective is all about expanding perspective and making sense, or sense making, I should say. And sense making is looking at the patterns across time and space and people, and then being able to drill down and make sense of it. How we do that is the skill of asking questions, of looking at patterns, looking at points, and seeing trends and making sense of that through scenario planning. So those are some of the key critical skills of the future of leadership that we need to hone. So this image is about sense making, and the Vikings, what a great show on Netflix, by the way, if you're into blood and gore and historical violence. Maybe I am. I love the story. Vikings, when they were pioneers and there was no map of the world, had to use all of their senses to navigate the territory. And in some ways, we are like that now because we are not clear on what the future is going to hold. All we have is our sense-making abilities to navigate this uncharted water. So the Vikings, what they did is that they used their sense of smell to pay attention to the change in the weather. The air smells differently when it's around land. It smells differently when rain is coming. They use their sense of taste. They put a plumb bomb down to the bottom of the water and pull it up and taste it and see if there was any fresh water there. They listened to the call, if there was calling of the birds, which indicated land being nearby. They observed the flow of the water, and it rebounded differently off the ships if it was rebounding off land back to them. So they used all of their senses to look at what the situation was shifting. And this is a metaphor for what we need to be doing now, is to use our sense-making skills to look at what are the shifts that are happening around us. And we don't need a massive pandemic to point out that things are shifting. These are the skills that we're going to need to be able to adopt and practice moving forward, is looking at those patterns, looking at those shifts, looking at the signal in the noise for what's coming and how we might steer our ship safely through that. Okay. So the second one is to choose your role. And this next piece of work is out of my next book, subtle plug, People Stuff, which will be out in July, hopefully. So my editor has the first draft of it. And choosing your perspective is critically important. I just realized I have no idea what time it is, and I didn't bring my clock in here. So we'll get to that in a second. Choose your role is really important. And there are 5 archetypes that you can choose in order to meet the current situation, and maybe a blend of each of them. And as leaders, I think using archetypes is a really powerful, effective way of cutting through and being effective and influential. So archetypes, we understand across cultures and across time as patterns of behavior that resonate for us. So an example of an archetype is the role of mother or father. Immediately that conjures up certain sense of behavior, activity, responsibilities. Or it might be king and queen. So immediately that conjures up a pattern of responsibilities and states and so on. And I talk a lot about this in my first book, Composure. In this book, People Stuff, there's some specific business roles and purposes that require different archetypes. And these are the 5 I think we need to look at and see what's possible. So as I go through them, identify which ones you think would be useful to you right now, and also the ones which might be useful to you in the coming few months. So the warrior archetype is a really powerful one. And what the warrior is fighting in this context, in expanded amplifier context, is that they're fighting to build a better society. They're fighting to win and keep better values for us. So when we think about the warrior archetype, think about the altruistic warrior, not the warrior like the Vikings that go out and slash each other and conquer. That's not what I mean by warrior. The warrior is about fighting for what's right, for what's good, what's contains beauty, goodness, and truth. Those are the altruistic qualities of the warrior. And so the warrior embodies courage. The warrior embodies the spirit of, we can get through this, that spirit of hope, that spirit of enthusiasm, that spirit of galvanizing the troops. So the warrior, I think, particularly in this crisis, will come to the fore as we move through the difficult stages of this crisis. So the benefit of the warrior is courage. Every archetype has a shadow, and for the warrior, the archetype that is its shadow is bullying. As soon as we shift our focus away from serving others and serving the greater good and to looking after ourselves and our own needs, we become a bully. And all of us have this within us, and we need to be mindful that where our focus is. Is it on others, or is it on self-regard? So the next one is guardian. And the guardian archetype is about, it lives in a paradox as well. So the guardian is about building a future and maintaining what's best about the traditions and a current experience moving forward. And it's a constant tension. So our experience of guardians might be somebody who puts on the brakes and who's always criticizing about, go, hang on a minute, what about this? What about this? I don't know if that change is good. And so they can be playing devil's advocate in conversations about what's next. And yet the guardian's purpose is to preserve what's best while we build something new. And there's a huge amount of guardian archetype being activated right now in different businesses because we are moving into something new. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want to take what's best with us. So what's best and strong about the guardian is tradition. And what the challenge is actually embracing progress. And the shadow for the guardian, if we become too hung up and clinging to what we think is the best and what we think is the right way to go, we become blinkered in our perspective and we can become a fanatic. So we need to be mindful that as a guardian, yes, we want to grow and preserve, that we don't become fanatical in our position, because that is not helpful and it actually puts grit in the gears, if you like, of progress. And the fourth one is diplomat. Diplomat is about winning what's best for me and for you and for the greater good. And so the skills of negotiation, of being subtly influential, of being compassionate as well as effective is a really important skill. The diplomat is valued for their stoic reserve. They don't get triggered by what's going on. And I think the diplomat we're going to need to use in terms of negotiating with different stakeholders about what's next. So if you think about if you have to negotiate rents for your premises, or if you have to negotiate with the government for access to this, We cannot do it from a warrior point of view because that'll put people offside. We do it from a diplomatic point of view. And the strengths of the diplomat are negotiation. And then we need to be mindful, like the warrior, that we don't default to looking after self. And that the shadow of the diplomat is the trickster, somebody who manipulates behind the scenes. And what moves us from diplomat to trickster is concern for our own self-preservation, our own status. So like the warrior, as soon as we go from looking outwards to looking inwards, we're screwed and the shadow comes on. So we need to be mindful of that. Okay, and the fourth one is pioneer. Pioneer. In a couple of months, I think the pioneer is going to come to the fore, and we'll need to activate this as an archetype. The pioneer is all about building the future and moving forward. And the skills and qualities of the pioneer are all about creativity and courage to explore new horizons while there is not a clear pattern. So a little bit like the Vikings exploring, a little bit like the pioneers in North America who set forth into unknown to them territory. And what is the value of the pioneer is innovation. The creative innovation spirit is critical here. The shadow for the pioneer, interestingly, is the gambler. And this is the gambler who takes reckless risks, who doesn't weigh up consequences well, and gets hooked on the game of creating, of winning, and that can turn them into a gambler. And I think that we need to be careful of that. I remember when I worked at Outward Bound, I was taking on what I thought was a pioneering attitude, and the organization was going through a difficult time. I said, why don't we just wipe the slate clean and start over? And for me, that was really exciting, the pioneering thing. But really, I was being a bit of a gambler. It's like, screw it, let's just do something different. Luckily, the board said, I think we don't need to do that. I think we can, they played more guardian. Let's keep what's working and work on something new. So I had a more measured approach. And I think we need to be mindful that we don't just throw everything out and give up and start again. And the one that sits at the center of it all, which needs to be in effect at all times, is the archetype of the elder. And the elder shows up in different cultures in different formats. In Australia, we have Aboriginal elders who are elevated and respected for their cultural knowledge, and they are custodians of cultural knowledge, and they're custodians of a lot of the information and patterns of land and caretaking of the land. So they hold a lot of experience and knowledge with them. In different cultures, elders are called upon, like in North American Indian cultures, they're called upon to help adjudicate different decisions and using their wisdom to help settle disputes and so on. What I mean about elder in this context is the elder has perspective, so they can zoom out to 7 generations and more, and they can zoom into the immediate moment. They can manage that balance effectively, and they are also balanced with wisdom and compassion. So they lead with both of those perspectives, the now and next, and they have wisdom, which is the best of the mind, best of the decision-making abilities and discretion and observational skills, and have best of the heart, which is compassion. And compassion is about understanding how people feel and wanting to fix it if we can, and to be of service if we can. So leading with wisdom and compassion with a perspective that zooms in and zooms out is the archetype of the elder, and I think we need to have that at the centerpiece of our leadership moving forward and activate these other archetypes at the same time. So I'm going to take a little breather for a moment, and if you want to, in the chat box, list which is the archetype or archetypes that are resonating for you right now. Which are the ones that you feel that you need to activate to get through the next couple of months through this? Rob, what time is it?
9:13.
9:13? Okay, thank you. Oh, there's the clock right there. Great. Okay. So Stuart says, pioneer is critical to survival. Yeah, so the long-term survival, absolutely pioneer. Because we are in uncharted, as everybody keeps saying, unprecedented and uncharted territory. Absolutely. So what does this mean for business in the future? No one knows yet. And we need to be cultivating that. And like I said at the beginning, I think that kind of work, that pioneering work, will come into the fore over the next couple of months. depending on what stage you are in your business response, whether you have the energy and focus for that just yet. Some people are still in dealing with the immediate. Yeah, there is no traditional. We are creating a new normal, that's for sure. Stephen says all 5, but with a balance, the elder leader provides the wisdom to know how much of each of the other 5. Yeah, so absolutely. So the elder is the counterpoint that we need to channel at all times. If we lose the elder, and by the way, the elder also has a shadow. The shadow of the elder is when we shift from being in service to others and to start believing our own story, our own legend. As I just interviewed Brigadier Nick Jans this week, and I asked him about that. We were talking about power, and the elder has a lot of power and influence, and it's gifted to them by the people that they lead because they've been in service to the tribe. As soon as we start believing our own legend, is what Nick Jans called it. I call it hubris or arrogance. That is the Achilles heel of the elder, and we can actually devolve from elder into tyrant. It's a really stark contrast, and we need to be incredibly mindful of that. As soon as we think that we got it all figured out, we've been here, done that before, we have 50 years of experience, all of a sudden that hubris can start to arise, that arrogance can come out, and we can start blowing it. And so the counterpoint and the critical skills for the elder is curiosity, humility, and care. Those are the 3 principles of the elder that we need to always manage. Stephen says, elder needs to know how to listen. Yeah, that's the curiosity piece. They have to use the power of their position to listen and share their position of wisdom. Yeah. And I think it was Socrates who said, I know that I know nothing. And that's what made him the wisest person in the world, which actually meant that he was sentenced to death. That's a long story, but that's what he said. I know that I know nothing. And I think as leaders, that's a really good principle to take forward. And it's a paradox also, because we do know stuff, but we don't know everything. So if we go into it saying, I don't know everything, I stay curious and open, we have the best chance of surviving this. Okay, so onwards from the archetypes. So 3 critical shifts: expand your perspective, zoom in, zoom out, choose your role, be deliberate with your archetypes, and use them to help embody how you show up as a leader and amplify something worthwhile. So as an amplifier, what the hell are you amplifying? These are the 3 things that you can amplify. One is your message. And I think now more than ever, people need a solid message to help us get through this. So what is a message? A message is making a stand. A message is making a declaration. And it might be, I don't know where we're going, and I know that we believe in this. We stand for the values of, We stand for the values of goodness, beauty, and truth. We stand for a collective consciousness that looks after our most vulnerable. We stand for an economic system that is fair and equitable, that takes care of everybody and doesn't leave anybody behind. So you might have a declaration, a message in your business and your practice that is powerful like that. So I think some work around message is critical for the future of leadership. Motivation is the next piece. How do you engage with your people and connect with them so that they feel connected to your message and want to do something alongside you? How can we get people motivated to explore new things? How do we get people motivated to support each other? How do we get people motivated to craft something new together? This is the real work of leadership. This is the real work of amplification. And the third piece is mojo. Mojo is how you are looking after yourself as a leader. This has been my sing-song since day dot as a leadership professional, is that if we're not looking after ourselves, there will be nothing of us to give. And unless we look after our mojo, we got nothing. So we need to, especially through this crisis, be looking after ourselves, especially well, making sure you're doing all the primary things. Eating well, resting, sleep is so important. And because we have so much on our plate, sleep is even more challenging to get well. So your self-care needs to go through the roof through these times. And how you're encouraging others to do that is really important too. And one of the things I'd like to quote is this one from John C. Maxwell, is that people buy into the leader before they buy into the vision. And having a message and being motivating and having really solid mojo, because mojo, your energy, your presence is incredibly influential, is incredibly contagious, dare I use that term. So we want to be contagious in all the right ways, and our mojo is the best way to do that. So find out ways of how you bring your mojo to town. One of the ways I like to bring my mojo up is to look for the funnies. So there's a lot of really bad news out there, and you just have to open up ABC every day and see how many people have died in Spain overnight and who's doing what. And it's depressing as hell. So to counterbalance that and show up in service to the people that I work with, I look for what's funny. And I'd love to hear how you're getting your funny on. If you pop that in the chat box, I'll share one of the ones I've just discovered, which is, he's hilarious. His name is, his Twitter handle is Nick Heath Sport. Nick Heath Sport. And he is an out of work sports announcer in the UK. Now, because there's no sport going on, he's a little bit bored. So he's taken to Twitter, and what he's done is that he's filmed these little videos of day-to-day society, and he comments on it like he was commenting on a sports edition. It's hilarious. So that's my little gift to you. Nick Heath Sport on Twitter. You can go and check out his little cameo videos. They're about a minute long, and it's just a little bit of a funny. So if anybody else has got some good funnies to share, that would be really useful. And the other one I've rediscovered is on YouTube, is Talking Kitty Cat. And it's this guy who 10 years ago, this has been going on, he filmed his cat, this hilarious cat who just talks a lot. And they did a little voiceover about this talking kitty, and this cat has attitude, and it's hysterical. And there's a whole story that goes on for 10 years around this. So those are my two funnies. If you got some more funnies, that would be lovely to share. So these are the essential skills. So this is the third takeaway for you that you need to have in order to be prepared for leadership for the future, which is basically now. So we got a comment from Beth. Jeff Van de Zant. Okay, I will Google that afterwards. Thank you, Beth. Appreciate it. Always looking good for good funnies. So these skills, these are the classics, right? We always need to balance the paradox of, it's a polarity, actually not a paradox, between team and task. So how's the team doing and what are we working on? And so we always need to be flowing between those two, team and task. And we also need to be flowing through what's now and what's next. And in the balance of that, we have leading culture when we're looking at the team now. And what's next is leading change, because when we're leading change, it's always about the people stuff, never usually about the project. So we need to be balancing that. And then looking at our team, at our task, and now it's about leading conversations. How do we get the most out of our people? How do we develop productivity, effectiveness, and efficiency? And as you move your all teams to remote, that's going to be a big conversation. How do we get people engaged and focused as we go through this next period of time? And the fourth one is leading strategy, and that's focused on next and task. So those are the fundamentals. They don't sound like new skills, except our context is different. So the kinds of things that we need to be managing through each of those areas in the context of the future of leadership are, with culture, it's about mapping, measuring, and managing culture. Those are essential skills, not just letting it go by default, particularly as we go through the home isolation period. You do not want to let your culture devolve, become decrepit. There's a huge opportunity here to create and accelerate and accentuate a fabulous culture. In leading change, this is really about having the skill to map systems, interconnected systems. It's an advanced leadership skill, and this is absolutely what we need to hone right now. Leading strategy is a lot about that perspective piece, which is understanding patterns, being able to do environmental scanning, and craft scenario planning, crafting scenarios. And doing all those futurist skills are core. That's going to be absolutely core in the next few months. And leading conversations, as I mentioned, is about touching base and managing team dynamic and cutting through issues before they go off rails. And it's hard when people are remote. You don't know what's happening during their day all day. And you do not need to have a camera on them all day. Do not do that. So points of failure in all this stuff, if we don't have any pathfinding, and if we have no innovation skills, and we have no influenceability and no culture map, we're screwed. So this are some points of failure you want to avoid for the future of leadership, which is now. So a summary slide, your takeaways are 3 critical shifts: expanding your perspective, choose your role, amplify something worthwhile. Your key skills to develop or leading culture change, strategy, and conversations. And you are not alone. There's a couple things that you are more than welcome to join. Every Monday at 3 p.m., I have a Monday Mojo with Zozo. And this is a really unstructured, informal place for people to drop in on Zoom and have a chat to other leaders across the country and in different organizations, and just normalize a little bit, touch base, get some sanctuary from the chaos that you're in, and the sounding board. So that's a completely free service I'm offering for the time being through the winter. And I'll send in the follow-up notes where you can access that. And the other thing that you might want to do is to hook up and have a conversation with me. I'm in service to you, not a sales pitch. I understand people have no budgets. I have no budget too. But this is about being of service to you, and you can use me for whatever you like. Brainstorming how you look after your team through this, even technology tips on how to use Zoom better, to how to manage your culture. Whatever it is that you want from a leadership point of view, you can grab 30 minutes of my time, completely free. And there's the calendar. I would love to talk to you. Trust me, I have an empty calendar. It'd be nice to talk to people. So you're more than welcome to join in there. Amplifiers is my community of leaders, and that's another opportunity if you want something more formal and structured. We look through those 4 lenses of leading, culture, change, strategy, and conversation. We do one each quarter, and we gather via webcast. We were meant to have full day in-person immersions. Obviously, we're not doing that. We're doing it virtually, not a whole day, just in powerful little sections. So we take some of these concepts deep and we apply them immediately to your business and your context. So that's what we got. Last parting thought about how to think about what we're going through. And this is a chrysalis from the common crow butterfly. It kind of looks like a blob, and it's an interesting thing. One of the metaphors I heard used about what we're going through is to go into hibernation. And I actually think it's the wrong metaphor. Bears, when they go into hibernation, as I was saying from my Canadian experience, bears, they eat as much as they can in summer, and they find a little cave and they curl up and they sleep through the winter, and they draw down on their body fat until they wake up in the spring and get to start all over again. And I think the idea of hibernation is like, let's just shut down and preserve what we can, use what we can until things get better and we can go back to normal. And as Stuart said, there's no going back to normal. We are creating a new normal. This is why I think it's the wrong metaphor. Hibernation is not the right thing. I think transformation through metamorphosis is what we need to embrace. That's exactly what we are going through. So in the story of the caterpillar and the butterfly, a caterpillar is born from a little egg larvae thing, turns into a caterpillar and eats as many leaves as possible. When it gets really fat and juicy, finds a twig and starts to spin a cocoon around itself with silk thread. That's exactly what we're doing right now. We are spinning cocoons around ourselves and our businesses and our people, preserving what we can, protecting what we can. And when that cocoon is formed, what happens is that the caterpillar releases enzymes that dissolves its body. It's kind of gross when you think about it. It's like caterpillar soup. And what happens in the caterpillar soup is that there's actually these little discs. Now, what are they called? I keep forgetting the name of the damn things. Where's my chrysalis information? They're called imprint disc, imaginal discs. That's right, imaginal disc. So these tiny little imaginal discs are in the caterpillar soup, and they are like little imprints, like the DNA of what becomes the butterfly. So there's little imaginal discs for the eyes, little imaginal discs for the wings, for the feet, for the body. And these things get activated in the soup and eventually form the new butterfly, which cracks open and becomes a new, completely different version of itself. And I like this as a metaphor because that's what we should be doing through this cocooning phase. Yes, protect ourselves and then dissolve what we have, but be a guardian with it. Keep what works. Those are the imaginal discs, and we can create something new from that. And I think this is a more useful metaphor. It's productive as well as peaceful, as opposed to let's just close our eyes and pretend nothing is happening, because that ain't so. This will be a new world after this. Okay, so that's it from the formal side of things. I think we're coming up to time. I would love to take any comments or questions that you may have. So if you would like to make a comment or a question, now is a good time to do that. If anybody would like to share something that was useful from that or their key takeaway, that would be also awesome. It's so good to have so many lovely people on here. Anybody on video, would you like to make a comment or make a share? Okay, so a question, I'll take a question in the chat box. How do you amplify motivation? Is that just inspire? Is it just inspire? So I think there's two answers to that. So how do you be inspiring is yes. So inspiring is about unleashing the excitement in another. It's not about you showing up and being all glamour girl or glamour guy and being like, I'm so inspiring, I'm so great, because that's a quick path to being hubris. It's about showing up with a message and paying full attention to the other person and saying, you are capable, this is what we can do. And so this is about being inspiring to them. And then inspiration causes motivation. So inspiration is what lights people up. Motivation is the follow through and getting things done. So inspiration is the message. The motivation is about the structures you have in place to encourage taking of action. So hopefully that explains that a little bit. So it's not inspire is motivation. They're kind of two separate things, but linked. Thank you for that question. So those are my thoughts around the future of leadership. There's a lot to contend with. There's a lot to get done. And I wake up every day excited to work with big thinkers with big hearts who want to make a big difference. And I think there's a huge amount of opportunity that we can do that together. I think we're not in this alone. We can come together and create new, amazing ideas. And if you want to play with me in doing that, that would be awesome. If you want to play with others, great, do that. Find places where you can connect and share ideas and build on each other's ideas, because as we keep saying, we're all in this together. And I really feel that, I really mean that. And we need leaders like you who have got the resources and the nous and the will to go big. So this is what we need moving forward. So thank you so much for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. And I'm delighted to meet some of you as well. So I'm going to stop recording. And if anybody wants to hang around and have a chat, then you're more than welcome to. And if you need to get on with your day, which everybody has a lot going on, feel free to sail away. So I'm going to stop recording. And if anybody wants to hang around for a chat,